Okay, we have discussed about the three defense mechanism, three-line defense in immune system. We have discussed about the innate immunity that include two-line defense, the first line defense and the second line defense. Now we move to the third line defense, which is under adaptive immunity. Okay, adaptive immune defense. So adaptive immune defense, also known as acquired immunity. Okay, also known as acquired immunity. They have to recognize, they have to know who is the pathogen before, then baru dia activate the mechanism. Okay, so this adaptive immune defense involve three steps. First step is recognize the antigen. Second step is to respond the antigen. Respond for the antigen. The last one, to memorize. So, memorize the antigen. So these are the main steps under adaptive immunity. Okay, under adaptive immunity or third line defense, the main lymphocyte that involved in adaptive immunity is the B lymphocyte or B cell and T lymphocyte or T cells. These B lymphocytes will result with the formation of plasma cells. Later, the plasma cells will produce antibody. The B cells and T cells just now is under adaptive immunity. Okay, they are activated at the third line defense. The B cells and T cells under adaptive immunity, they are capable of recognize and bind to a specific antigen. What is antigen? Antigen is the pathogen, the cancer cells, the transplanted tissue, and the organ that bear antigen, the immune system recognize as non-self. So our immune system recognize them as non-self. We call it as antigen. Okay? So the B and T lymphocytes, they have antigen receptor on their plasma membrane. So the receptor protein shape of the B and T cell allow it to combine with a specific antigen. Just imagine, okay, so this is the pathogen, the antigen, okay, with a nucleus, and each and every single individual antigen, they have their own ID. Okay, let's say they have their own ID. This ID is a antigen A. So the B and T cell, the lymphocyte, have also receptor protein on their plasma membrane. So this receptor protein shape of the lymphocyte, they can bind to the antigen of the pathogen just now. So it is easy to recognize the non-self individual and they can destroy it. That is the basic concept of the lymphocyte in adaptive immune response. Okay, adaptive immunity is primarily the result of B cells and T cells. This include several mechanisms and several types of B cell and T cells. For B cells, the B cell receptor will bind directly to antigen, and B cells give rise to plasma cell. And this plasma cell will produce and secrete antibodies that later will be killed by the other macrophage or natural killer cells. Meanwhile, T cell receptor will bind to antigen presented by the antigen presenting cells. We call it as APC. Later, helper T cell will regulate specific immunity and the cytotoxic T cell kill virus infected cell and cancer cell. Adaptive immune defense or adaptive immune response are divided into two types of immune response, and the name is cell-mediated immune response or immunity and antibody mediated immunity. Okay, the name given is based on the mechanism involved in this process. Okay, and also the cells involved in these two adaptive immunity is different. For cell-mediated immunity, T cells is activated. For antibody-mediated immunity, B cells is activated. And the mechanism involves several cells. That's why the name cell-mediated immunity involves the activation or the action of several types of T cells. Meanwhile, for antibody-mediated immunity, the B cells will induce the production of plasma cell that later this plasma cell will secrete antibody. That's why the name is cell-mediated and antibody-mediated immunity. Okay, the other difference between these two types of adaptive immunity, instead of the type of the cells involved, which is T cells for cells-mediated, B cells for antibody-mediated, type of antigen also differ. Okay, so cell-mediated immunity, T cells is the lymphocyte involved, and the antigen that they target is actually from inside the body. For antibody-mediated immunity, these B cells will target the antigen outside the body. Okay, outside the body. What is the meaning of antigen inside and antigen outside? Pathogen, invader, or everything that harmful to our body, we call it as antigen. So, what is the example antigen from inside the body? It is cancer cells. Cancer cells is cells that come from our body, our own cells that proliferate extremely and make cancer cells. And also cells that infected by the pathogen or virus. Virus infected cells. For antibody-mediated immunity, they will target pathogen from outside, meaning that all the virus or bacteria come from outside. And the most important is this adaptive immune defense, in order for them to be activated, they must recognize this pathogen before they can take action. That is important. Okay, so we have three differences of cell mediated and antibody mediated in terms of the process, the who take part, which is cell. This one antibody, plasma produced by plasma cell. The cells involved, the lymphocyte involved is the T cell, this one B cell, and also the type of antigen they target. For cell-mediated immunity, they will target antigen from inside the body, which is cancer cell and also virus-infected cell. The cell, our body, that infected by the virus. For antibody-mediated, they will target pathogen or antigen outside the body, which is virus, bacteria that are recognized before this. Okay, let's discuss about cell-mediated immunity by T cells that target cancer cell and virus infected cell, which is the antigen from inside the body. So once the APC, which is, let's say this is the cancer cells. Cancer cells, they have the antigen or ID on their surface of the body, and this ID detected by APC. These cells is antigen presenting cells. These antigen presenting cells recognize there is an pathogen, invaders or harmful cells in our body, so we need to kill them. So APC will tell the T helper cell to activate cytotoxic T cells to kill this cancer or virus infected cell. Okay, so this is the process. When the cancer cell detected, APC will tell T helper cell, and T helper cell will tell the cytotoxic cell to activate and kill these cancer cells. At the same time, T helper also tell the memory T cell to proliferate and memorize the ID of this cancer cell. So later, when there is the same cancer cell or virus infected cell occur again, detected again, and it will activated immediately this process and kill that cancer cell or virus infected cell. That's why the name acquired adaptive immunity. Acquired or adaptive immunity. They need to recognize first. They have memory for them. So next time when the same thing occur, they just immediately go to that cancer cell and kill their cells. Okay. Next, for the antibody-mediated immunity, when antigen antigen outside the body enter and recognized by the B cells, helper T cells will tell the B cells, or will activate B cells to produce plasma cells. Plasma cells will secrete antibody against this antigen, okay, and this antibody will attach to the antigen, so it will make this antigen outside, come from outside, accumulate, clump together. So the other lymphocyte such as macrophage or natural killer cells, when they see this clumping of antigen, they will immediately kill them. And at the same time, when B cell activated plasma cell, memory B cell also being activated, so that it will produce B cells that will later recognize this type of antigen. Let's say antigen A. So they will store the information of this antigen by the memory B cells, and later if there is infection occur again by this A antigen, the adaptive immune defense will be activated immediately.
Okay, we have discussed about the importance of helper T cells in third line defense. So helper T cells is very important because this helper T cell will tell the B cell to produce plasma, and plasma will produce antibody to attack the pathogen. Meanwhile, the helper T cell also tell the cytotoxic T cell to destroy the pathogen from inside the body, which is cancer cell or virus infected cell. If let's say something happened to the helper T cell, meaning that our third line defense cannot protect the body at all. As we can see from this example, which is HIV infection, and HIV will use the helper T cell as their primary host, meaning that the target of this virus is the helper T cell. The host, which is the helper T cell, will produce viruses that go on to destroy more helper T cells. When this virus already control the helper T cell, meaning that they cannot recognize which one is the origin of cell or which one is the toxic cell. At first, the individual is able to stay ahead of the virus by producing enough helper T cell, but gradually when the HIV count rises and the helper T cells count drops, so the patient of HIV will susceptible to opportunistic infection. Okay, the victim will get several symptom and several infection, for example shingles, candidiasis, and also pneumonia. Another type of active immunity besides the natural one, we also have an artificial active immunity. This can be done through an immunization or vaccination. Through a vaccination, we are introduced with the weakened virulence or weakened pathogen or the pathogen product, so that it depends on our memory B cell and memory T cells to respond to the lower doses of antigen so that they can store the information of this pathogen. And in future, if there is an infection by this pathogen, our body have the immunity against that pathogen. Besides active immunity, we also have passive immunity, and the passive immunity divided into natural and artificial. Natural passive immunity usually get by the babies from breastfeeding, and what happens is the antibody or the immunoglobulin from the mother will be transferred through the milk consumed by the baby, so that the baby also have protection against certain disease, which is specific for the antibodies they get from the mother. Meanwhile, for the artificial passive immunity, where the creation of um, monoclonal antibody against certain disease or infection agents, and this passive immunity is usually short-lived, and they need to introduce whenever the disease or infection come again. Okay, with the end of this slide, I end my presentation. If you have something to ask and you don't understand about the topic of immune system and lymphatic system, please ask your instructor for further explanation. Thank you and have a nice day.